Mr. Bean is not only a national treasure, but an international one at this point. The programme first aired in 1990, and over 30 years on, it's still beloved across the world. The original idea for Mr. Bean as a character came from Rowan Atkinson, who plays Mr. Bean, whilst he was at university. The programme was an almost immediate success, and Rowan Atkinson came into a good bit of money over the years following. This, paired with his successful acting career in other roles and live comedy performances, made Rowan a very wealthy man indeed. What many Mr. Bean enjoyers don't know is that Atkinson is a huge petrol head and has had an enviable collection of world-class cars for over 25 years. His most notable and infamous vehicle was his magnificent Mclaren F1, a 1 of 106 supercar, still regarded as one of the best cars of all time. Take a look at it, isn't she beautiful? Anyway, as any true petrolhead should, Atkinson ragged his F1, squeezing every last drop of performance out of the 6.1 litre V12 on countless occasions. With the mileage he has amassed, there's a reasonable chance no other privately owned F1 has got even close to the mileage on his. Over his 17-year ownership period, Atkinson racked up over 40,000 miles and a couple of pretty monumental crashes along the way, which is unsurprising. Despite the F1 being capable of well in excess of 230 miles per hour, it's got no ABS, power steering or all-wheel drive to catch you. Atkinson's first crash in the F1 happened in 1999, 2 years after he first bought it. He was heading down the A6 in Forton on a Monday afternoon in late October when he got into a crash in a Metro, rear-ending it. Although Rowan was luckily unharmed, the Metro driver, named Margaret, did sustain some minor whiplash injuries. Rowan reportedly asked police not to name him following the accident, but trying to fly under the radar as a very famous man in an extremely exotic car is obviously quite challenging. He ended up sneaking away from the scene, hiding in a meat warehouse, according to Lancashire Telegraph. The press all waited outside the meat warehouse, clawing at the door to get a glimpse of their hero. What they didn't realise was Mr. Bean hatched a plan. He jumped into the back of a frozen meat van which was parked up against a delivery bay, and he was taken away at high speed. Unfortunately for him, a couple of school kids did spot him making his escape, and the press soon followed. The gang of reporters quickly got back in their cars and rushed after the van in an attempt to grab Rowan wherever he was dropped. The frozen meat van managed to get to Forton Services, which was a nearby service station, where Mr. Bean was picked up by a private car which took him up to Carlisle. Now, it might sound like Mr. Bean had just performed some sort of hit and run, but that's absolutely not the case. Since this news story came out in 1999, a time when reporters actually did their job, we got some really insightful first-hand accounts. Although Margaret, the 62-year-old woman who was in the crash, did sustain some injuries, there were no hard feelings on her side. Her husband Robert talked to reporters and said that his wife was shaken up, but luckily she was fine. He went on to say Rowan Atkinson was very nice about it all and had actually phoned them up a few times afterwards to check up on how his wife's recovery was. Phil Draycott from the region's fire brigade service was one of the first to reach the scene. He said that Rowan was very concerned about the lady and didn't really say too much else. His first crash, luckily, had a bit of a funny side to it. The thought of Rowan Atkinson getting in a scrape with a Metro and then running away from press by hiding in a meat van is surprisingly Mr. Bean-esque. His second major crash in the F1 was unfortunately not quite so light. He was lucky to get away from this one alive. During the beginning of August 2011, Atkinson was driving down the A605 in Haddon at night. The then 56-year-old lost traction, causing him to spin completely a number of times. While still entirely out of control, he smashed into a tree and a lamppost, which caused the car to catch on fire. Fortunately, he escaped the car in time, managing to walk away from the crash. As you can see, The repair bill was not going to be light to fix it this time. Fixing the car back to its original state was a huge task undertaken by Mclaren in Surrey, and it took them 2 years. The total bill for the repair was an eye-watering $1,432,340, which was completely covered by his insurance. This broke a record as the most expensive insurance payout ever recorded on a car in Britain. A few years later, in 2015, Rowan decided to give someone else the opportunity to experience owning this brilliant machine and listed it for sale. It managed to reach a whopping $12.2 million, or about £8 million. This means he made a profit of over 7 million quid, despite crashing it twice. That's equivalent to about £34,000 per month in earnings, just from owning his dream car. It's clear from the way Mr. Bean talks about cars and adores driving that money has never been a factor in what cars he drives and buys. It's amazing to witness someone actually use cars like these in the way they're intended, and there are few people more deserving of owning one than Mr. Bean. Cars are meant to be driven, not hidden away in storage like a rare Pokemon. So yes, although the F1 got battered along the way, I would still rather that than it never being used to its full potential.